Ancient Egypt. For millennium, it has captured the imaginations, hearts, and minds of generations of truth seekers, eager to know who really built the pyramids, when they were built, and why they were built.
This documentary series is comprehensive. It's the biggest documentary series ever made about ancient Egypt. This documentary series will not only rewrite the history of ancient Egypt, it will turn the history of the human race upside down. So come with me as we go down the Nile and we discover the truth beneath the sands of Egypt. Ever since I was a child, I had a fascination with ancient Egypt. Any book, any documentary, I watched it, I read everything. But every time I saw it or I read it, something about what the Egyptologists were telling me didn't ring true. And for years and years and years, like a big jigsaw puzzle, I tried to put the pieces together. And I tried to put them together the way the Egyptologists had them. But the picture didn't make sense. And then I came to Egypt and I saw the evidence for myself. And the picture started to take a different shape. So come with me as we go down the Nile and we discover the truth beneath the sands of Egypt.
For decades, those in positions of authority and power in the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities in Egypt have known of the existence of a massive secret network of tunnels and chambers on numerous levels, extending far beneath the surface of the Giza Plateau.
In part one, we examined just some of the evidence that's been kept from you.
Ancient technologies, alien technologies, stargates, time machines, sealed chambers and tombs containing statues, sarcophagi with alien mummies, the whole of records, the star charts of the gods going back 500,000 years, even a spaceship trapped by a pole shift.
I'm delighted to be joined by Bill Brown and Richard Gabriel, each of us with a lifetime connection to ancient Egypt and over 15 to 20 years of personal experience in Egypt, and in particular with the Giza Plateau. Together, we will reveal information that has been withheld from the world by the Egyptian authorities. Why? Because we are at crisis point. Join me in part two as we discover even more evidence and we uncover the cover-up.
In 2008, a Polish team investigated the ground at the Pyramid of Hawara, near the ancient city of Arsinoe, Crocodilopolis.
A Polish archaeological mission was approved by the Supreme Council and gave us a 2.5-year permit to do what they called restoration of the Hawara pyramid and to determine what the cause of and where the groundwater was coming from.
Unfortunately, the descending passage is flooded. But it wasn't always that way. When Flinders Petrie was here, he gained access right down into the interior of the pyramid. But what does that tell us? It tells us that somehow the water level has risen or got into those inner chambers. We need an expert to work out the cause. And fortunately, we've got one.
I had expert knowledge in both ground penetrating radar and in site plan surveying. So in the first year in 2007, we went in and did a series of ground penetrating radar tests. which did a huge circle around the pyramid to find out, where the groundwater was coming from. Then they did a second one a little bit closer in. And then I went on and personally led a third GPR scan directly on top of the pyramid itself. And what we were able to determine was that the mud brick pyramid at Hawara was half covered with sand, that half of it was still underground. And so when we were walking around on the sand surface, we were actually doing ground penetrating radar into the pyramid itself. And that created a lot of interest.
I know from my own times there that it's pretty obvious how the water got into the substructure, because they put a big canal right beside the pyramid, and when they were digging it out, there were all of these chunks of temple that were being lifted out. So obviously they broke through the roof, and with the canal they flooded everything that was below the ground.
That's correct.
Ancient reports by the ancient Greeks Herodotus, Diodor, Strabo and Pliny had described this as the location of the legendary labyrinth of Lake Moeris, the largest building ever constructed by humans. With a diameter from east to west of 48,000 Egyptian cubits, just over 25 kilometers, it was built of granite and a special technique with gold, which was transmitted from a vanished civilization much older than the Egyptian civilization. It comprised about 3,000 rooms and corridors with movable walls, and supposedly written on the walls within its multitude of temples and courtyards are the constellations on a huge zodiac and the astronomical knowledge of the Egyptians, including 36 magnificent panels written with hieroglyphics related to calculations of the last averting of the displacement of the poles of the Earth. Possibly including a hold of records, there are secret rooms within the labyrinth that are supposedly filled with art objects and documents of the history of a civilization that blossomed there thousands of years before. Herodotus, who traveled through Egypt in the 5th century BC, mentions in his second book of Histories, chapter 148, an enormous megalithic building which the priests there called the work of 12 prehistoric kings.
It has 12 roofed courts with doors facing each other, 6 face north and 6 south, in 2 continuous lines, all within one outer wall. There are also double sets of chambers, 3,000 altogether, 1,500 above and the same number underground. We ourselves viewed those that are above ground, and speak of what we have seen, but we learn it through conversation about the underground chambers. The Egyptian caretakers would by no means show them, as they were, they said, the burial vaults of the kings who first built this labyrinth, and of the sacred crocodiles.
The reports about the labyrinth show that these ancient historians and the Egyptians themselves already at that time all said that these megalithic constructions were all created prior to the dynastic period of the pharaohs.
The main objective of the Polish team was to locate the previously undiscovered entrance to the Pyramid of Amenemhat.
And we were trying to explain to the Egyptians that the entrance that we wanted to look at was on the eastern side, whereas everybody else was talking about the southern side.
And within days, they found 2 pyramid entrances before turning their attention to find a possible access to the underground labyrinth.
And we actually found the entrance on the eastern side that was inside the foundation limits of the Hawara pyramid. And it was confirmed by the information that Carmen Bolter showed from her NASA images. I showed everybody that when you go into this tunnel, if you could ever get past the water, which was only temporary, and it was only at the front entrance, because if you were to go through the mud, and I said, pump the water out, dig the mud out, and I'll show you how to get inside. And they said, no, we can't do that. And I said, why? He says, it will damage the pyramid. So I said, okay, all right, here's what we can do. Let's go back right now, and let's go around to the eastern side. Give me a shovel, I'll do it myself, and I'll hire a couple of laborers. and I'll show you where the door is to get down in. No, we can't do that. Why? And then I said, okay, well, here's NASA's picture, and they're showing exactly the same thing that I'm telling you. And I gave all that information to Hawass in 2009 at a special meeting. He asked me to work for him. I said, no. And there was a big argument as to who was going to concentrate in what area, and that actually led to the big fight that canceled our contract because these people wanted to work in the south, which I think you're aware of.
They didn't want you scanning a particular area because they knew what was below the ground.
We were really fortunate in 2009, the last season we were there, the Egyptians approved the use of front-end loaders in what would have taken us 3 more seasons of excavation and clearing. We did in 2 hours with a front-end dozer. And we opened up the whole area. And we said, dig here, drew a thing on the sand. And they said, no. I walked off the site and quit.
No permission was granted for excavation and opening, and after the quick and sensational discovery of a golden mask, Dr. Hawass stopped investigation immediately, even before the search for the labyrinth or the access had begun at all.
And the very next day, the Dr. Rada, who was in charge of the whole project, he called up and he said, hey, don't go, come to Hawara. We just found the mummy with the gold mask. It was a plan. They didn't find it.
Because if they had found it, it would have been worldwide news.
Everything that I have seen is really fake or a plant to draw you away and your attention away from the truth.
And what is beneath and around the pyramid that they're wanting everybody to believe is not there?
An underground city just like everywhere else.
But Bill had the evidence.
With all the GPR scans, it took about a year in order to interpret everything, and that was done by the geologists from the Warsaw University here in Poland, and they analyzed exactly, but it was too late. We had that information too late to be able to really show what we had found. And so then other people went in and took our information. I personally had a meeting with Dr. Hawass in his office in 2009. We did a big conference at the Cairo University Department of Archaeology, set up by Dr. Shaheen, who was in charge of the project. And what we actually showed was the entrance to the eastern side, that if they were to dig down only 3 or 4 meters, they could go into the door.
Now, at this time, Bill, there was also another series of scans being done by Dr. Abbas. And the scans revealed a lot more than just the pyramid, didn't they?
Yes, certainly did. They did find a lot of information.
In April 2009, detailed scans were made of the ground at the Pyramid of Hawara and revealed powerful images of subterranean structures and objects, indicating that the famed labyrinth may well in fact have still been there. A subsequent public revealing of the results at Ghent University was squashed when Zahi Hawass, much to the stunned disbelief of all those involved in the scans, declared to the public that nothing had been found.
I was there.
There was major structures and corridors and energy sources and all sorts of things. I think, was it only 12 meters below the surface? That was all there, that things just had to be pumped out and you could literally walk in. What did Dr. Hawass say about that?
He took my private engineering report and said, I will give it to the authorities to check out. And they did, and they gave it to the French guy to show up. But they did nothing, and they're not going to do anything. And they won't do anything, and they won't let anybody else do it until we can find a way to prove that it's real.
So the scan results, which are pretty astonishing when you see the images,
yes.
That doesn't look to me like sand and dirt.
No.
So the structure under there, that's been, well, we won't say it's been covered up. Let's just say it hasn't been uncovered. It hasn't been released to the public what's really there and what could be there, which, if it is the famed labyrinth, has huge amounts of information going back 500,000 years.
Exactly.
This was potentially one of the greatest discoveries in history, and this knowledge should be possessed by all of mankind. So why would Zahi-Hawass, the self-declared saviour of the history of ancient Egypt, want to cover it up?
Was this the first occasion where you encountered, let's say, some sort of clandestine resistance from anyone in authority?
Oh no! I mean, that was in 2007, and I'd been in Egypt 2005, 6, and 7, 3 years before, and met all kinds of resistance at Giza. So they actually tried to take the attention away by taking us to Hawara.
Were Hawass's actions related to his reasons for drilling in front of the Sphinx in 1980 and covering up all of that? How many other discoveries and events has Zahi-Hawass withheld from the public, and why? We didn't have to wait long to find out. Later in the same year, 2009, Zahi-Hawass was at it again, and this time it was recorded and broadcast in a video posted on YouTube where Dr. Zahi-Hawass and Dr. Mark Lehner reported on their ground drilling around the Sphinx. Of course, the Giza grapevine went into overdrive.
Officially, the investigations were carried out to determine whether the Sphinx was threatened by the rising groundwater level, with Lehner supervising this work on behalf of Hawass. 8 boreholes, each with a diameter of 10 centimeters, were drilled to a depth of up to 10 meters, one of which was made under the left pore, exactly at the place that Edgar Cayce's eldest son, Hugh Lynn Cayce, wanted to investigate deeper in 1978.
And what does Hawass say at the end of the video? That they didn't find anything. But given Hawass's history, if they did find anything, would they have told the world? I think not.
In September of the same year, 2009, reports emerged of an illegal tomb excavation at Giza, of a private shaft dug down from within a house in the adjoining village of Nazlet el-Samman by operators in the black market to access the subterranean tunnel network and rob underground chambers.
It's been known for decades that things have been unearthed and discovered beneath houses in the village of Nazlet el-Samman. But these things are normally not made public because they're usually just sold off on the black market.
What was the purpose of the villagers digging down inside the house?
They were recruited, they believed, of going down to do a little bit of a safari, as they call them, to pull out a few artifacts and so on, to make some money and so on, have a little bit of an explore.
The question is, who were they exploring for?
I understand that the whole operation was masterminded by a national organization, a world organization. They put the money behind it to finance it. And the idea was, for them, they knew that there was something very, very special going back to ancient history that was at a much deeper level. The guys were put to work in S13 to dig down and, get what they wanted, but there was an agenda behind them, an impetus behind them to go deeper, and I believe also to open up the way to the stone barrier to gain access to the plateau.
Reports emerged that, during one such secret excavation, first a house wall and then the whole house, near the Giza wall, collapsed, tragically killing 6 villagers, and that it took for days to recover the bodies as they were buried in an 8-meter deep shaft and a small burial chamber.
That's the official position. The word from the people in the village and the families of the men is that the tunnel was deliberately collapsed by a series of explosions so as to trap the men inside. And they were left there for 4 days. despite there being heavy diggers accessible in the vicinity, with the authorities obstructing any rescue attempts by the family before the so-called official rescue 4 days later to ensure that the men were dead.
Can I ask you your thoughts on the tunnel that was from number 13, the building number 13, as to whether it genuinely collapsed or whether there was some foul play involved in that tunnel? What's your knowledge of that incident?
Well, okay, it isn't an opinion. We know. We stayed in the house right beside 13. We stayed there. We stayed in the house where the secondary tunnel was dug from, that they used after the collapse and what happened on that one. We spoke to the people there. We know exactly what happened. We were there a few days after it happened. 4 of the guys that were murdered were our friends, were taking us to other places before this happened. They were murdered. The brother in the house right beside us, number 13, with the lady there, we were trying to console her. She was on the ground wailing and weeping and crying and begging for us to help and so on. Because in the melee of all this happening, knowing the family connection, they'd whisked the brother away. He was in jail getting the shit kicked out of him in there. He didn't come out, as far as I'm aware. He was one of the missing ones. But the 6 guys down the pit, we know copious about, almost firsthand, about everything that happened there in the village. But we understand that a couple of the guys got a bit greedy. They did find gold and stuff down there, statuettes and so on. Went off to Sharm el-Sheikh, and he was followed by the police. They waited till they got back to the dig site before they sprung the trap. What they did was they moved 20 villages out, cleared them. And what our friend there was very crafty about, he offered to be the tea caddy looking after these police and guys that were all milling round. They got a JCB in there, they got trucks, we got the ambulance standing by. So he was on the spot, witnessing to what happened. And we were probably one of the first, maybe we were, the first sort of Western investigative people that were sort of accepted in the village, and we'd stayed with them. So, there was total recognition and friendliness there, who through tears as well, just blurted it all out to us, what had happened that night. Of course, the police were back there, the new guys were underground. We were told that one of the people down there was a guy in a suit and tie. And we were told that guy was the money man for the local village mafia. And they were involved in some way.
The resultant official rescue by the Supreme Council of Antiquities authorities resulted in them accessing the underground tomb, discovering the men were all dead, before filling in both the original shaft and the rescue shaft, and ensuring the whole matter was buried, with only the local newspaper making the event public.
But don't believe everything you read in the papers. The word from the village is that the men trapped below the surface were still alive when the rescue teams reached them, but they were subsequently all murdered.
This is the reported story to us. Hawass came to the site after they got them trapped underground. Hawass, we understand, was convinced that these guys weren't just hapless pawns in this, that they were in on and actually knew about the $1 million sort of prize of what was deeper below ground there.
The story that was related to you seems to indicate that Hawass knew what was under the ground there in terms of the energy devices and all of those things.
Yes.
And do you think he was connected to this international group in some way?
Damn right, of course he was. God almighty, yes, totally, because he was the one that brought it to a conclusion. They're all trapped below ground. Hawass was on site. He was furious. He was shouting and screaming down at them, to come out, release themselves, what they knew. He wasn't going to let them up until they confessed to what they were really up to. He could not believe that they were down there at this confluence of tunnels, which Hawass must have known about years previously from when they did the sewerage works down through there, and they were able to pinpoint the temple. Him and Lena wrote a book about. You know, he knew what was going on. I'm sure of it. What was down there, the potential from the surveys and things that they will have done in the past.
Well, Richard, the story that's been related to you seems to say some very interesting things. The first one is that the tunnel didn't naturally collapse, that it may have been detonated.
I'll tell you exactly. When he could get nothing from them, more because they couldn't tell him. They couldn't tell him what the overall plan was. They were just pawns in what was going on in there. It wasn't long afterwards. This went on for some time, and they weren't coming out because they were afraid they were going to get killed.
The tunnel hadn't collapsed. There were still men alive down under the tunnel when Hawass got there.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it was all open. They had their tunnel down in there. He and other villagers had the same tale. They said it sounded like several car doors slamming.
So muffled explosions.
But when he drew closer, because he was the closest villager to be able to, and he was like this, weeping to me. He said, "They killed them. They blew explosion. They blow them up down there." And he's like this. A little later, this is when we are now on the scene. And what had happened was they basically buried them. They covered it over and they let it go for 4 days, with periodic visits to see if they were going to come clean. After 4 days, there were no further sounds down there. So they then mobilized the digger, which of course dug the damn hole to penetrate to the cross tunnels that are down there. And then they eventually shored it up. When I got there, I didn't think twice. I just climbed over and climbed down the damn pit. And they're all going, no, look, camera, no. I just ignored it and went down. And I went down with the camera and started photographing around. Could see the tunnels. I was happy. I got pictures. I'd visited. I'd take my own view of it all. I could see the tunnel traversing back towards the house that we were in, sort of less than 20 foot away. And I could see what was going on. They tried to backfill, to block off the chambers that they'd cleared. And I could see on the ground, there was blood everywhere. There was clothing and blood. It was a mess.
Either way, it confirms that there are underground tunnels beneath the Giza Plateau. But what sort of chamber was it? And what did the Supreme Council of Antiquities discover inside it? And what other chambers did they discover?
At the same time, after the collapse of the original shaft and while the SCA were investigating, disturbing rumors emerged about another adjacent official rescue team who explored the tunnel network and discovered numerous chambers and objects, including 10 to 12 gold statues and the sarcophagus and mummy of an alien.
I want to ask you, because you're probably familiar with when the Russians were here building the Aswan Dam and Project Isis. Now, they discovered a tomb just outside the Giza Plateau called the Tomb of the Ancient Visitor. And that was all covered up as well, apart from the information that was leaked out in the 70s. But it would seem that this Tomb of the Ancient Visitor could very much relate to these others that...
Of the same time.
Yeah.
Undoubtedly. Apparently, after when they opened it up to get them out, they didn't take the bodies out first. The first thing they took out was a sarcophagus, a female sarcophagus. On the decoration of it, the decoration that mirrored whoever was inside, was three-toed. It was elaborately decorated with sky bluish ceramic tiles. He described it with fabulous decoration and so on. And to get it up out of there, he said that they had to tilt it up, he said, and they literally cordoned the area while they were doing this. And they brought the ambulance in, that was for the men, and they loaded this sarcophagus up and shoved it in the ambulance. Feet first, he said. That's a particular point, he said, because the police chief who was there overseeing all this, he sat on beside the sarcophagus, the head of it, in the back of the ambulance. And he pulled the cloth back. He said, and the police chief, he said he was, and he mentioned it like this. He said he was like this, weeping into his hands. He was overcome with what was there, what they just taken out.
You're describing something that doesn't sound human.
You could take that conclusion. Yep, I believe it, but I can't say it because I didn't see inside.
But the exterior would seem to indicate that perhaps it wasn't human.
Correct. There are ways now where they used to be able, from ground level, not to have to descend shafts as we had to, that you could walk down and get down into. And he said there were people lost down there in the labyrinth, and there are fabulous things down there now, even now. When we're talking to the guard, shall we say, of the site, who'd been there for years and years, I desperately wanted to talk to him from his experience about the tunnels and the labyrinth below ground, where it reaches and so on, where they link up to where the main center of inhabitation would be below ground. And he was sort of trailing off on his own, talking about things here, things there, where the tunnels go and where they reach to, and they go out to Hawara and so on and so on. He was just sort of generalizing about it all. And I said, do people come from down below? He indicated, yes, sometime I have been to visit them and they have come to visit me.
So they're talking about some sort of race of beings living under the Giza Plateau.
Yeah, just say others.
You're probably aware of the writings of Herodotus and Strabo and many others. And the ancient scripts talk about the layers under the Giza Plateau, and in particular, a race of beings of gods and hybrid species. Do you think that this mummy, this sarcophagus, could have been related to one of them, and that these are the others that the Guardian talks about?
Undoubtedly. It just fits, doesn't it? If it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, and walks like a duck, it's a duck.
And this is the sort of evidence that is being kept from the people of the world.
According to Bill Brown, he spoke in secret interviews to individuals from the village of Nazlat el-Samman who retold a shocking tale of events.
Tell me about what happened for you around the time of this collapse and this so-called sarcophagus of the three toes and the mummy. What's your involvement with that?
It was a Hollywood blockbuster, and it was hot stuff. I was given immediate access to it, of course, and within an hour, I was notified by some people that were involved with the incident, and I was aware that they were. They personally drove me to their office, and we sat down, and they said, we have something we would like to show you. And they showed me the movie on their cell phone, and I just looked at it and said, oh, I'll give it back. Oh, yes, I've seen this before. And they were a little bit surprised. And so they brought in a person, a woman, and very interesting conversation transpired. And they asked me if I was interested in purchasing the mummy that had been recovered that was shown in the movie. And I just said, oh, how much? And they said, 1 million. And I said, sorry. And they said, why not? You can't get the money? I said, no, it's not who you say it is. It was an alien body. It wasn't the body of Khufu.
So they were trying to say that it was the body of Khufu.
What had happened at the time was my wife had, and we both had indicated in 2005 and in 2006 the exact location of where they would find this body of Khufu. And it just happened to be exactly on the opposite side of the wall that the Building 13 shaft collapse occurred that Richard was talking about. And so they were digging in that location, expecting to find the body of Khufu, and they found something else, much more valuable.
Now, we spoke with Richard earlier about the collapse of the tunnel in the village and about staying at number 13, which is where it was happening.
And so I certainly was totally aware of stuff that was going on. And I say that because I want to protect people's names, because I know who they are.
So when you're saying you're protecting people's names, you're protecting innocent people. You're not protecting criminals.
Yeah, these people have families. They have families to protect.
Who are the villagers scared of?
Military, police.
According to the people of the village, once the sarcophagus was removed, within a few days, someone, it's not clear who, ordered the silencing of all those involved. And it's reported that 30 people were subsequently hunted down all over Egypt, either imprisoned or beaten to death.
At the same time, a death threat penalty was publicly announced as a fear factor to stop any further illegal thefts of antiquities.
And one might think that these events would have quashed the whole issue, but to the contrary, it inflamed it.
In 2010, a series of secret, private GPR scans were performed inside the village area and proximate to the collapsed shaft that scientifically confirmed the existence of the underground anomalies, tombs, and the secret tunnel network beneath that particular section of the Giza Plateau.
At the same time, other interesting events were taking place.
The Giza Plateau was playing host to the 2010 Red Bull X-Fighter Games in May, and in preparation massive excavations were made in front of the Sphinx to house the pylons and ramps.
I was there in April of that year, and I can tell you, this excavation was massive. It was not just a simple narrow hole to hold a pylon. It was a huge, graduated hole, maybe 50 meters in diameter, that systematically made its way down beneath the surface of the Giza Plateau. I couldn't believe that anyone would approve this sort of work in such a sensitive and important area right before the pores of the Sphinx. But it seemed it had happened before.
The first concert held before the Giza pyramids was Louis Armstrong in 1961. The next group of concerts happened in 1978 with the Grateful Dead, Frank Sinatra in 1979, Julio Iglesias in 1980.
Right around the time Zahi was drilling down before the pores of the Sphinx.
There was a considerable break until the next concerts, Andrea Bocelli in 2003, Shakira in 2005, then another break until 2010, with Julio Iglesias again, Mariah Carey, and Andrea Bocelli again.
And also the Red Bull Games.
And all of these, except perhaps for Louis Armstrong, had to have authority from, and possibly have been coordinated by, possibly only one person. Zahi Hawass.
To me, the Red Bull Games was clearly a cover-up event to find and remove artifacts from beneath the surface of the Giza Plateau, right under the noses of both the public and, more importantly, the global scientific community. I left Egypt the next day, but 2 weeks later, associates who were staying at the Sphinx guest house, which looks directly over the Sphinx and over the Giza Plateau, were awoken in the middle of the night by the sound of muffled explosions and heavy machinery.
They filmed stuff being removed from under the Giza Plateau with a front end loader.
Yes, and they gave that film to me.
And that person was a very reliable source if they didn't make it up.
Been there many times, very close friends. They didn't make it up. He was always at the right place at the right time, capturing what was happening, and he knew it in advance.
Upon investigation, they witnessed and filmed heavy loaders removing sarcophagi and statues from the Red Bull Games excavation from beneath the Giza Plateau. The footage is grainy, but it clearly shows large tractors moving large objects around in the middle of the night. No announcement has ever been made by the Egyptian authorities as to why this was happening, or why this was allowed, why it was happening in the middle of the night, nor what was discovered, what was being moved, nor to where it was being taken.
So why all the secrecy? No public announcement has ever been made by the Egyptian authorities as to what they were moving, why they were moving it, why it was allowed, and why it was happening in the middle of the night, nor what was retrieved, nor where it was taken.
When my friend gave me the film and I put it on my website that day, and I had 10,000 hits the first day. And the next day, there were all kinds of black cars following me around everywhere I went.
I was one of those 10,000 who saw that, and I downloaded a copy straight away because I knew how important that was, yes. And because I'd been there 2 weeks beforehand and seen it for myself. Right. So I knew how important it was that there were things going on that people needed to know about.
We know exactly where that shaft leads to. We know exact, positive, 100% proof.
And that was not the only event that was happening on the Giza Plateau. They repeated having numerous concerts, often with thousands of soldiers there protecting it. But the audience was only, I think, 1,500 maximum or something.
Yeah. It's a cover-up. But that at one time in that same area, that they actually went in one night and they put a circle of lights pointing outward in every direction, 360 degrees, so blindingly that you couldn't see or even take pictures of what was going on inside the circle of the lights.
If it was orthodox, proper work, would be much safer and easier to do in the daylight.
Certainly.
So the fact that it was happening in the middle of the night with all of these spotlights pointing out so that no one could see in would certainly indicate that this was something that the world was not to know about.
Well, it was certainly a hype to create speculation, yes.
That there were other events happening that year simply confirmed my beliefs.
Around the same time, the Polish university team, along with Lucina Lobos, inspired from their discoveries at Hawara in 2009, became active in Giza, and the search began for more chambers in the Mastaba cemetery east of the Great Pyramid. But they also located 5 subterranean rooms near the entrance area of the Sphinx, which were subsequently checked and confirmed by ground penetration radar in 2011.
Just over 6 months later, on the 25th of January 2011, the Egyptian Revolution officially began.
The date was supposedly set by various youth groups to coincide with the annual Egyptian police holiday, as a statement against increasing police brutality during the last few years of Hosni Mubarak's presidency, and consisted of demonstrations, marches, occupations of plazas, non-violent civil resistance, acts of civil disobedience, and strikes.
In the midst of all of this, in April 2011, the Polish team commenced large-scale cleaning work with heavy equipment and excavators of the Mastaba cemetery east of the Great Pyramid.
The revolution escalated, with violent clashes between security forces and protesters, resulting in at least 846 people killed, over 6,000 injured, and protesters retaliating by burning over 90 police stations across the country.
But there's another side to all of that. The alleged rape of one female journalist resulted in all media and all tourists being expelled from Egypt at that time, because it was deemed to be too dangerous for them to remain in Egypt, meaning there was no one to see, no one to watch, no one to report what was really going on.
Whatever the scenario, the cooperation with the Polish university team was then suddenly broken off, and the permit was withdrawn.
The official version? That the Poles had not complied with the conditions. The unofficial version? It was a dispute between the two egocentric exponents.
Shortly after, investigations were continued again, this time under Dr. Hawass.
Clearly, because the Polish team had discovered something of great importance.
And once again, nothing more was published.
Is it possible that the whole revolution was just a diversion? Just as the Luxor massacre may have been in 1997? Just as the Six-Day War may have been? This time, to remove much larger objects from beneath the Giza Plateau without the prying eyes of the outside world.
Investigations continued through the revolution, with 2 more undiscovered chambers proposed to exist in the Great Pyramid between the King's Chamber and the Queen's Chamber, with a second solar boat discovered on the south side of the Great Pyramid. In addition, in May 2011, archaeological mapping of Saqqara and Tanis by Dr. Sarah Parzak of the University of Alabama, using high-resolution infrared satellite images from NASA, revealed 17 previously unknown pyramid ruins, 1,000 graves and 3,000 settlements. That was followed, in 2012, by the discoveries of Angela Mikol, who, also using satellite images, claimed to have discovered 2 previously unknown pyramid complexes 100 kilometers south of Fayum, one 20 kilometers from Abu Sidhum, the other 90 kilometers from Abu Sidhum, but her discoveries were completely rejected by all scientists because she made the images using Google Earth.
We even had Mark Lehner popping up to claim discovery of the Giza Harbour Basin.
We have now outlined the Central Canal Basin, which we believe was the primary delivery area at the foot of the Giza Plateau. It was a thriving port over the 3 generations of Khufu, Khafre and Macarinos.
The revolution ran its course, and in 2014, following an election, which was boycotted by opposition parties, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, a retired military general and previous director of military intelligence, went on to become Egypt's president in 2014.
I'm not going to go into his pedigree here and now. Suffice to say that it raises red flags for me as to whose interests he really serves.
The events of the revolution had stalled all investigations and the activities of foreign concessions at Giza.
Except, it seems, for Mark Lehner and Zahi Hawass and the black market.
The People's Revolution settled, investigations continued when, in January 2015, during an illegal excavation in the village of Nazlat el-Samman, at a depth of 10 meters, a homeowner came across large stone blocks and underneath them a long underground tunnel.
The causeway up to the Great Pyramid is only preserved in the upper part, since the main part leads under the present districts of Nazlat el-Samman and el-Haranea. Had the excavation discovered the lower part of the causeway?
The excavation was interrupted and halted when someone anonymously informed the police, and the Ministry of State of Antiquities immediately sealed off the property and set up an investigation committee under the archaeologist Kamal Wahid. A few months later, in spring that year, Wahid published that the tunnel really leads to the Great Pyramid and in some places is well preserved, with black basalt floor slabs and limestone wall blocks. However, he didn't say anything about the length and if they found a valley temple at the lower end.
Surely this is the long sought after causeway of the Great Pyramid, which Herodotus had already described as being about 1.1 kilometers long, closed all around and illustrated with reliefs. Why has there never been an official announcement? To the contrary, there was another announcement.
In October 2015, a press conference was held at the Miner House Hotel in Giza under the motto, 2016, the Year of the Pyramids, and the Scan Pyramids project was presented, which, under the leadership and authority of the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities, and coordination of the Faculty of Engineering Cairo University and the HIP Heritage Innovation Preservation Institute, partners and researchers from Japan, Canada, France, and Egypt would work together to scan various pyramids and tombs with the latest technologies.
All of this effort, despite the fact that Zahi Hawass maintained there was nothing more to be discovered on the Giza Plateau.
In 2015 also saw the return of intrusions of the Giza Plateau by commercial ventures, when, in October 2015, to convey an image of stable security after the Egyptian crisis, the Greek-American composer, keyboardist, pianist, and music producer, Yanni, held 2 concerts in the very same location before the Sphinx as the Red Bull Games had been held.
Again, I was there a few days before the concert. I saw all the work that was being done, setting up the stage, setting up the seating. In my opinion, there was an ulterior motive unfolding. It was just another cover-up to be able to once again access what lay beneath the surface, beneath the stage and the outdoor seating that was erected.
An Egyptian security force of 3,000 people secured the concert area.
I doubt the audience was even half that many. So were 3,000 security forces also used later in the evening to cover up what was really going on? In this case, there was no subsequent footage of any clandestine activity occurring in the middle of the night. But I'm not convinced that the concert was not simply yet another excuse and opportunity to rob the Giza Plateau. And who was it that authorised and oversaw the concert on the Giza Plateau? Well, I'm not 100% sure, but I think we all know it had to be someone with complete knowledge and authority over the Giza Plateau. And that wasn't all that was going on.
On the morning of the 31st of October 2015, between the times of the 2 Yanni concerts at Giza, unknown terrorists supposedly destroyed Metrojet Flight 9268 in flight over the Sinai Peninsula through an onboard bomb. Shortly after the crash, the Islamic State Sinai branch, previously known as Ansar Beit al-Maqdis, claimed responsibility for the incident, and in 2016, the Egyptian president, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, acknowledged that terrorism caused the crash. However, in 2020 an Egyptian appeals court ruled the crash was not an act of terrorism, and it dismissed lawsuits against government officials, Metrojet and Ingostrak, ruling that the identities of the 224 victims had not been officially established and it was impossible to issue compensation to them as a result.
So was the incident an accident, or a coincidence, or a diversion, a distraction, another cover-up?
The events of the crash and the revolution had somewhat stalled all investigations and the activities of foreign concessions at Giza, but in 2017, Dr. Zahi Hawass suddenly became active again and said in interviews that he had now taken over the management of the Scan Pyramids project, a claim which was officially denied by HIP, but since then, Hawass has been a member of an Egyptian committee that examines the results of a Scan Pyramids, and the first thing Hawass did was to wipe all the results of the first 2 years off the table, claiming they were wrong, which annoyed the researchers of the different teams very much.
Which is exactly the same thing he did in 2008 with the labyrinth results at Hawara. And remember, Zahi Hawass has no qualifications or experience in any technological scanning techniques whatsoever. What did the scans reveal, and why did Zahi Hawass try to conceal it? And will permission ever be granted for the scans to continue?
In addition, although the theory of the existence of a second Sphinx on the Giza Plateau had been around since the excavation of the first Sphinx in 1818, and the discovery of the Thutmose stream stele between its forepores, and revived by the report in 2007 by the Egyptologist Bassem el-Shamar of previously unknown satellite images that showed an anomaly under the hill on the north side of the Sphinx that he believed could be the remains of the second Sphinx, which was supposedly destroyed by a lightning strike because it is said to have worn a metal crown. Jerry Cannon and Malcolm Hutton published in 2017 that they had discovered the second Sphinx using infrared satellite images exactly where el-Shamar had described it.
Was there any public announcement made? No. Was there any announcement made about investigating or excavating? No. Why not?
The commercial concerts on the Giza Plateau recommenced in 2017, first with Armin van Buuren, Red Hot Chili Peppers in 2019, and most recently, the Black Eyed Peas in 2021.
Maybe Zahi Hawass already had too much on his plate.
It was also in 2017, thanks to the courage and perseverance of certain truth seekers who, though initially met with suspicion by Egyptian authorities that wanted to know who they were, what they wanted, and how they even knew about the shafts, gained permission to explore the Osiris shaft, allowing them to descend more than 38 meters and 3 levels down into the limestone bedrock of the Giza Plateau.
This was the very same area that was omitted from the report of Dr. Abbas around 10 years earlier. Clearly somebody knew about it. Had the original scans done by Dr. Abbas confirmed its existence, and that evidence being suppressed?
The Osiris shaft, as it is known, was actually discovered as early as 1933-34 by famed Egyptologist Dr. Salim Hassan, who claimed that the tomb dated from the Sayitic period, 26th dynasty, circa 600 BC, and labelled it
the most extraordinary example of this type of tomb hole.
Others dispute this dating and believe it dates back much earlier.
Surely it's possible that the upper level is from the Sayitic period, but the lower levels are much older.
In 1996, the multimillionaire Dr. Joseph Shore, a life member of the ARE, the Association for Research and Enlightenment, which was founded in 1931 by psychic Edgar Cayce, received an official exploration license from the Supreme Council of Antiquities in May 1996 for research of the substrate for geological faults and cavities that could potentially represent a danger to tourists or the monument. The truth is, Shore made ultramodern remote sensing equipment available, worth well over $1 million, because he wanted to find the whole of records mentioned by Cayce, and thereby proof of the existence of Atlantis. One of the many goals of this research was the third level of the water shaft, today known as the Osiris tomb, beneath the Khafre causeway discovered in 1935 by Dr. Hassan. The first level opened to a spacious but empty room. The second level, 14 meters down a shaft, contains a chamber room with 7 niches for 7 large sarcophagi.
The niches where the sarcophagi were, or the one that still is, all those photographs have yielded fabulous images.
Only 2 black basalt and granite sarcophagi remain, each weigh several tons, both empty with their heavy lids slightly ajar.
When Hassan first discovered the shaft, back in 1933-34, he recorded there were 7 sarcophagi. So one can only wonder what happened to the other 5 sarcophagi between 1936 and the present day. Perhaps that's why its existence was kept a secret, so the sarcophagi could be souvenired.
In February 1997, Boris Said and James Herterk from the ARE descended 18 meters down a second shaft that led to the third level, more than 38 meters below the surface, which had been emptied of water only shortly before, after probably having been water-filled for millennia, and discovered a chamber, 18.46 meters long, 15.78 meters high, and 5.43 meters wide, where, positioned in the center of the chamber, was a granite surface just a few centimeters beneath the sediment.
The chamber is known to flood, but the authorities haven't got a clue as to why it's flooding or where the water's coming from.
Using a ground-penetrating radar device, Herterk examined the subsurface and found a granite slab around 0.75 meters thick below, which was an anomaly, which appeared to have a half-spherical ceiling, around 2.5 meters wide. Said and Herterk reported their findings to the then Chief Inspector of Zahi Hawass, because their client, Joseph Shore, only had permission to carry out radar measurements and filming, not to conduct any excavations.
Hawassa's very strong public opinion that the Edgar Cayce believers were pyramid idiots did not, however, prevent him from working closely with the Cayce circles on various occasions in the 1990s, including appearing as a speaker with Joseph Shaw at the Egypt conference in August 1998, held by the ARE in the Cayce stronghold of Virginia Beach, USA.
There, Shaw publicly stated that this research had located a chamber or a natural cavity at a depth of 25 to 40 feet, as well as another subterranean chamber near the Great Pyramid, and also unusual formations within the pyramid itself.
Hawass then started the digs for himself the next year in 1998.
And, in a TV broadcast titled Opening the Lost Tombs, live from Egypt, shown on Fox TV on the 2nd of March 1999, Zahi Hawass played the main role, claiming credit as the discoverer of the underground complex beneath the Khafre causeway, that he personally had uncovered the second level and discovered the two sarcophagi.
All despite the fact that this room was discovered and entered by Salim Hassan in 1935.
The program placed particular emphasis on the third level, which Hawass presented as the Osiris tomb, and which had been discovered by Dr. Hershak.
But Hawass took credit for what was discovered in the chamber.
More than 38 meters below the ground, positioned in the center of the chamber, submerged in a pool of clear water, about a meter deep, is a sarcophagus covered in a stone slab decorated with an undecipherable crisscross of deeply carved lines and symbols. The sarcophagus, hermetically sealed by some form of ancient technology process, gives a higher magnetometer reading than normal, suggesting it may contain some sort of advanced technology.
Perhaps this is why it's been kept a secret. And we know the sarcophagus has been opened because there are photos showing that. But more than 20 years later, there still has been no official report of what was discovered inside. There has been a report, though, on the water.
Analysis of the water that contains some silt and debris by a certified water analysis lab in California showed a highest concentrate of sodium, followed by chloride, the percentages displaying a sodium level which is higher than that of the fresh water of the Nile River, which flows northwards approximately 5 miles to the east, but lower than the salinity of the Mediterranean Sea, into which the Nile flows.
Which means that the water that flows under the Giza Plateau is essentially salt water. Why? Where is it coming from?
The only known salt water lake in Egypt is Lake Moeris, 50 miles southwest of Cairo, in the northwest area of the Fayum Oasis. To the left of the Kafan area, from the south, is a tunnel entrance that passes beneath the causeway between the second pyramid and the Sphinx that also provides a means of passing under the causeway from the Great Pyramid to the Pyramid of Khafre, and that leads to other tunnels that may extend for miles and possibly linking up with other pyramid sites.
So, why the need for an underground water supply?
If the Great Pyramid was indeed intended as some kind of ancient power plant, as some physicists and engineers have theorized, then it may be that the water tunnel system existed prior to the actual building of the pyramids, or it was built as a functional part of the pyramids.
Maybe it's time to look at the water table beneath the Giza Plateau.
In 2017, Professor Sharaf Eldin M. Sharaf Eldin, from Cairo University, headed a group of 5 experts that conducted a number of surveys beneath the Giza Plateau, a total of 10 electrical resistivity imaging, ERI, 26 shallow seismic refraction, SSR, and 19 ground penetrating radar, GPR, surveys, primarily to investigate the groundwater table under the Great Pyramid.
That seems to have followed the path of the ancient path of the Nile.
Sharaf Eldin found that there are 2 groundwater systems in the study area. The first relates to the groundwater aquifer system around the eastern part of the Sphinx area, where the depth of the groundwater ranges from 1.5 to 4 meters below the surface of the ground, with an increase in the depth of the groundwater as you head west. The second aquifer is a broken carbon aquifer that covers an area beneath the Pyramid and Sphinx Plateau, where the depth of the groundwater ranges from 4 to 7 meters.
But I ask you this, if the survey was done to determine the water table under the pyramids, why was the survey only conducted on the peripheries? Why not the central part of the plateau?
So I went there on a trip specifically to get evidence of the pumping stations, so-called, to lower the level of the thing there. When I talked to a couple of friends locally, they laughed their heads off. You know, that he was punching a few holes in the ground and lifting this water table that was vast. You know, the aquifer that's below ground that we know of.
But there was more to the chamber than just the sarcophagus. There were tunnels leading into and away from the chamber.
About 10 months before the beginning of his first of the 4 expeditions, Shaw had discovered a passageway heading west behind the Sphinx that he determined continued on straight ahead, leading to the 3rd level of the Osiris shaft, and then continued onto the Khafre pyramid. Further, in 1997, Herschel located a cavity and a passageway in the lowest chamber under the sarcophagus, and consequently, in 1998, during the excavations on the north side by Hawara, another unexplored passage was discovered that pointed towards the Khufu pyramid. However, it narrowed after about 6 meters and was impassable.
Hawara spoke of plans to insert an optical probe up through the tunnels. But the public were never told of anything that came out of it. And without further exploration of the tunnel, Hawara determined that the passage didn't lead to the Great Pyramid.
Then, in a video by the Swiss artist Gregor Spory from 2009, Hawara surprisingly concludes that the tunnel at the north end leads 20 meters deep into a small vault, where 2 more tunnels continue on. One, he suspects, into the well chamber under the Great Pyramid, and the other into the secret chamber under the Sphinx.
However, in 2011, the passage was observed to be only about 9 to 10 metres, and no vault or any other further passages were visible.
On the one trip, I actually went up inside the mud tunnel. I went as far as I could get. It was opportunist at the time, but I went up and squeezed myself as far as I possibly could down the left-hand fork and into the right-hand fork. I wanted to see down into the chamber beneath the water and the scum and everything, to see where the sarcophagus was, to sort of get the alignment myself with the Sphinx. Over into the far corner where when it was drained down, when they were working in there, there's another oblique tunnel in the far corner that's the entrance is slightly caved and it's below water now.
The shore team also discovered the existence of a tunnel that lies around 12 meters below the Sphinx, as well as another one on the eastern side of the Khufu pyramid, confirming the anomalies found back in 1991 below the 4 pores of the Sphinx, which indicated the existence of a rectangular chamber.
But Shaw was very limited as to what he could reveal to the general public, because he was under contractual obligation from the Supreme Council of Antiquities not to make his findings public without their official permission.
Bill, you've had a lot of experience. You've been to Egypt, what, 60 plus times?
63 times.
And in that time, you've been in tunnels under the Giza Plateau.
Hundreds of times.
How vast is the network?
I've seen evidence that they go in all kinds of directions, and I had to pick one.
That's the day that we were taken in and went down 3 levels to infinite shafts. It was quite incredible. We went down a long way. We went to 3 levels. But you could see the change in construction embedded to the silt or the sand, where it changed from upper level down through different material, the sandstone, the mud brick, going down the samples of red granite as it went down deeper. But then we were told halted in our tracks by the guy that was showing us. And he brought a newspaper with him. But when he lit the newspaper and the flame lit, there in front of us, there's a huge shaft opening. difference of these shafts and tunnels we went down through, from the rough ones up above, you go down past the second level there, and they are cut as sharp as a razor. Incredibly, just like they've been put through with an auger, with a machine. And there's the shaft there. And he dropped the whole flamed newspaper down into the shaft. And we watched that thing go down till we couldn't see it go any further, until the light faded with the distance it was going down. We saw another chamber over in the village that we were taken to see. And in this chamber, there was a large platform, and the person who was guiding us that time, we went below ground, said, this is where the big men, as I said, the big men, like where they were laid out. And, he was referring to people of greater size than normal our size.
Well, that would be consistent with Herodotus as saying that the bodies of the gods that created the human race were laying in a labyrinth beneath the surface.
Yeah, totally so.
And we'd been into some places where I was taken, and we weren't going to come out. We entered an area of an anomaly in which an energy field totally wiped out everything, almost including our minds. Flashlights didn't work, batteries were drained, matches wouldn't work, nothing would work. It was very difficult to be present, at least in the physical. The only way we got out, and I'm just going to tell you, if you were a believer, I had to use my third eye, because that's the only way I could find my way out. And that's how we got out. It was totally in the dark. And that happened several times.
There's information here that almost all of the villagers, especially the elderly ones, are very, very aware of.
They all know. They all know.
And it's all being kept from the people of the world.
Yeah, totally.
So why was all of this research kept secret?
I talked to another guy up on there when we were having a reach around or being led around, and said, look, why isn't this invested? Why doesn't he set something up, Hamas that is, and go for all this? And in a sort of nonchalant way, I was answered back, well, I mean, you've seen down there. He says, you've seen some of the depths and things, and you've got an idea of what's already down there. He said, just think about it. To go down there, there's probably foul air in some of the places. He said it would take an incredible engineering job to set up, to put people down there on a proper investigation. He said, Hawass isn't bothered. He says he's got time on his sides. The authorities above Hawass have got time on their sides. They can just wait it out. They can come and go as they want to. They're working on other stuff at the moment. They'll get round to it eventually. And they just manipulate everything above ground, treating the public and everybody as dummies.
In late 2021, the local government and the SCA started demolishing the 40 to 70 metre strip of rows of houses in the village of Nazlet el-Samman adjacent to the Giza Plateau, so that could be cleared, under which further chambers, installations and the road to the Khufu causeway are suspected to still exist.
The village has literally been obliterated. They've thrown everybody out. They supposedly compensated them, but I doubt if they've adequately compensated them. But they've eradicated the village and they've razed it to the ground, that whole strip along there. Now, supposedly, one would think it's so that they can excavate what's underneath there. I don't think that's the case. I think they're trying to cut off the thefts that's going on and to seal it up. But your stables is still standing. Would you like to share anything about why?
Okay, sure. I'd like to go back to one statement that you said. It's not to stop the theft. It's to expand it. What they did was they had to take the witnesses away, far enough away so that they wouldn't see what's going on. It's going on every night. And I've been a witness of it, into a specific spot, which we call the stable house, which happens to be right adjacent to two of the only remaining buildings in the village that hasn't been destroyed at Giza. And I asked why. Well, I mean, I knew why, and I know that the underground activity of black market is even more so, and I have proof of it, but I don't want to get people in trouble, and I don't want anybody to get hurt, including myself.
So, are they trying to wipe out the black market so that they can souvenir all these valuable artifacts for themselves? Or are they wanting to control and conceal the truth about what is really beneath the Giza Plateau? Maybe it's both. Maybe they are genuinely going to excavate the area for the people of the world. I wouldn't hold my breath on that option, because given that they haven't made any public announcements, I don't think that's their agenda at all.
It is hardly surprising that politics and money has come to dominate all exploration and discussion of the plateau over the last decade. Consider the rewards on offer for major new discoveries which could challenge the whole basis of humankind's understanding of his past and his future. At the very least, they could lead to considerable riches and worldwide recognition, even immortalization in humankind's Hall of Fame.
So let me just ask you a couple of questions, Richard, because you've clearly been all over this, and we can give links to your website to anybody who wishes to go deeper into this. But do you think that there has been a cover-up over the Giza Plateau for decades?
Decades, yes. We go back long further than that, I think, right the way through from the get-go.
Intertwined in all these projects are a number of key players whose relationships have ebbed and flowed, sometimes dramatically hostile, sometimes cordial and respectful, with huge implications for the projects themselves and the way they've been presented to, or in some cases hidden from, the public.
So, what could be found if the tunnels and chambers are properly explored?
Ancient and modern reports speak of ancient technologies, alien technologies, stargates, time machines, sealed chambers and tombs containing statues, sarcophagi with alien mummies, the whole of records, the star charts of the gods going back 500,000 years, even a spaceship trapped by a pole shift.
For this information to come out, it destroys the narrative of modern-day Egyptology.
I've wrestled with that myself. I think it's held as a threat because there are selfish, greedy people involved with this who simply want to keep it and be able to use the technology, whatever it may be down there, for their own purposes.
We're talking about a corruption that seems to be endemic through the higher aspects of the Egyptian government and the Antiquities Department. To get something happening for the people of the world, it seems like we need international intervention. Because whilst these, whatever is below the Egyptian Giza Plateau might be in Egypt, what's there belongs to the people of the world.
I agree 100% with that attitude and that belief. And I'll tell you what I've been told. I've talked with the people that are aware of what we know, and we know that they know. And there's two theories. And one says that it would be damaging for people to really know the truth. So much damaging that it would create such hysteria that it can't happen. And they go on further to say that it's about timing. When is the right time for it to happen?
I would propose that now is that time.
I would go further and I would say, look, Egypt is an exalted land. It was selected for its unique nature to be the home, a central hub for an ancestral race that clearly had abilities way beyond us. It isn't something to look at as a threat. This is something, when it's opened and uncovered, that will actually boost the standing of Egypt in the whole world as being the host of this wonderful, wonderful prize.
But what are the physical obstacles that we have to overcome? What do you think should be done?
We are now at a crisis point where we could lose it all, because certain corrupt individuals in the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities are planning to take control of the entire village of Nazalt el-Samman for their own profit, and to conceal the true history of not only ancient Egypt, but the entire human race.
But is there hope? Will the greatest discoveries of modern man be lost forever? How can this crisis be averted? We need to turn this crisis into an opportunity and to seize the day.
I think the first thing is that the whole story needs to be bulldozed into the public eye, because people have been murdered to keep it a secret. And we need to step over that and get to the point now where the world not only knows about it, but takes charge of it to uncover what the truth is, so that ultimately we will be in a place, in a condition where we can benefit in a positive way from what our ancestors left for us to find.
So we do want the authorities to get involved, but the corruption is so high at such high levels that it's difficult to talk to someone that has enough authority to do something. And we're trying to do that, and we have been to over 100 embassies and people all over the world asking them to please get involved. I've been doing that for 5 months now. Everybody's afraid. So if we can do this and achieve this internationally, and people start taking action and asking questions, okay, I think that's going to happen.
But what would you like to say to anyone who's watching this film about what's under the ground in Egypt and what they can do, or what they can try to speak? What would you like to say?
What we know is truth, and that if enough people can accept the truth instead of deny it, walk away with it, or don't want to become involved with it, I would just say get off the fence. Period. Get off the fence. Now, I don't care what direction you go in, but stop being neutral and stop being afraid. And what's going on our planet right now is to instill so much fear in so many people to distract them from the truth. Stop being afraid. And as long as you're afraid, nothing's going to happen. So people sit on the fence because they're afraid. So if I can get somebody to get off the fence, then obviously they're not afraid anymore, and take action.
We need to activate the entire international community to tell the world the truth of what is below the surface, and demand that these tunnels be systematically, through proper, experienced and trustworthy concessions, be explored and the discoveries shared with the world. So first, you need to share this video. Second, contact your government representatives, because the discoveries may be in Egypt, but they belong to the people of the world. They belong to you. It's not just Egypt's history, it's all of our history. So thirdly, we ask you to support the cause. If you've enjoyed this video, if you found it informative, think of the decades of research that goes behind this. Think about the hours and hours and hours that goes into actually physically producing this video. It's been given to you for free. If you went to the theatres to watch it, you'd spend $10, $15 for your ticket, plus popcorn, etc. Why not dedicate that money to the ongoing research and getting this truth out to the public? Please make a donation. Keep us going. Keep us focused on revealing the truth for all of the world.